Hello everyone, welcome to our notes today on photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So these are going to be kind of intensive today, and I'm going to tell you that you're probably not going to totally get everything the first time, but all I'm asking is that you take good notes and you do your best to kind of follow along and see how we get to our final thing that we're going to talk about here, okay? It'll make more sense when we get there, but just, bear with me, hang out through the process, and hopefully this will make more sense at the end. So first off, what is photosynthesis? That is really important for us to know. So photosynthesis is the process where chloroplasts absorb sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, so this is CO2, to create sugars. Okay, so that's the long version of it. Essentially what chloroplasts do, they take that sunlight, they take that water, and they take carbon dioxide, that's the stuff that we breathe out, and they make food with it. Now, cellular respiration is the opposite. So it's the process where mitochondria take food, usually those sugars, and turn it into energy, water, and CO2. Now you might notice something going on there, a relationship between those two, and we'll get more into that in just a moment here. Now, the main thing that I want to get into today when we're talking about photosynthesis and cellular respiration is the equations and really getting into the specifics of where they start and where they end, okay? So I'm going to be introducing something to you today, and that is chemical equations, okay? Now I know it sounds scary, but I promise we'll get there, okay? So, based on our definition, what photosynthesis starts with is sunlight, okay? We're just going to call sunlight energy, okay? So they're taking energy. This is photosynthesis. We're taking energy plus water plus CO2, again, the stuff that we breathe out, and it becomes sugar. Okay, simple enough. Now, cellular respiration, we'll move down the page a little bit. Does the opposite. They take those sugars. Oh, actually, I also forgot. Sugar, and they actually also make oxygen. So that's why we say when plants help us breathe, that's what we're talking about. They also produce oxygen. So now we take sugar and oxygen, and they extract that energy and water and carbon dioxide. So you will notice these equations are opposites. What we end with on photosynthesis is what we start with on cellular respiration. What we start with on photosynthesis is what we end with for cellular respiration. So these things cannot exist without each other. That's why plants are so important to us. If you ever have a place that kind of feels really stuffy, like if your room doesn't have like a lot of windows or something like that, or it doesn't get a lot of good airflow, adding a plant can actually do a lot to improve your air quality because they're taking out that carbon dioxide that you breathe and they're turning it into oxygen that we breathe. So it's a really great reciprocal relationship between us and plants. Now, here is where we're going to get into the real nitty-gritty of photosynthesis, because there's another layer to this that is really important to talk about, and that is called the conservation of energy and the conservation of mass, okay? So, conservation of energy and the conservation of mass. Okay, so conservation of energy talks about the fact that energy cannot be created or destroyed, okay? Energy cannot be created or destroyed. Now, this is just a law in general. The amount of energy that it takes to, let's say, bake a cake, that goes into baking that cake and also goes into heat, okay? So the energy that you put into something still exists after you're done using it. You can't, unfortunately, take just a little tiny bit of energy and do crazy things like power an airplane, right? There's a reason that airplanes take so much fuel, and that's because it takes a specific amount of energy that has to convert directly into basically the amount of work that you want to do. So this one's maybe a little bit more out there to wrap your head around. So then let's talk about conservation of mass really quickly. And it's a very similar idea. So conservation of energy, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It is the same thing with matter. So matter also cannot be created or destroyed. Now, this one probably is a little easier to visualize. So, for instance, we'll go back to our cake baking analogy. If you take, 3 eggs and however many cups of flour and sugar and all of your liquids and all that and put it in the oven, you're going to get an expected amount of cake back out, right? If you double the amount of ingredients that you put in and you cook it, you're going to get double the amount of cake. If you do half the amount of ingredients, then you're going to get half the amount of cake, right? The amount of stuff that happens in any kind of chemical equation is always going to be the same amount of stuff at the other side, okay? All of the atoms that make you up come from the things that you eat. You can't magically grow to be huge and tall if you don't eat a lot of stuff, right? All of the matter has to come from somewhere else. Things can be destroyed as in they change form. You can burn things. They just turn into a gas or something along those lines, turn into ash. But those atoms, which are the things that make up everything, still always exist, okay? Now, this might have sounded like a weird sidebar to this, but it's actually really, really critical for our chemical equations. Now we're going to get into the real nitty-gritty of it. So this is not typically how we write a chemical equation, okay? How we write a chemical equation is similar to this, okay? CO2, that is a chemical formula. O2, that is a chemical formula. But water and sugar also both have their own chemical formulas. Energy does not. Energy will basically be stored in here, and don't have to necessarily worry about that, right? We know that energy goes into sugar, sugar comes out of energy. So how we would write this properly is energy plus H2O plus CO2 reacts to form, I know this is a wild one, C6H12O6 plus O2. Now, what in the world does any of this mean? Okay, so H2O, hopefully something that you're familiar with. The H2 means that there are 2 hydrogen atoms, and there's no number after this oxygen, so there's basically a little secret 1 there. And how we would draw this is we would have 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Okay, so it's basically just a description of how those atoms are laid out. Okay, CO2, let's make our carbons green here, would be 1 carbon, 2 oxygens. Okay, now C6H12O6, this one is huge. Okay, so there are 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms, and 6 oxygen atoms. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that. There we go. There is a specific structure to this, but we are not worrying about that with currently. Just how many of each there are is important. So you see there are 6 greens, which are our carbons. There are 6 pinks, which are our oxygens. And there are 12 blues, which are our hydrogens. So this is one really, really big molecule. Plus, it also lets off a little bit of oxygen. So we'll draw those guys real quick. And since it's O2, we're just saying there are 2 oxygens. Now, conservation of mass. Matter cannot be created or destroyed. But there's way more particles right here than there was on this side, right? There's only a grand total of 6 over here. This guy alone is, I almost said 18, 24 molecules, right? So this just created things that it couldn't have, okay? There are too many molecules here for what went into it. So we have to balance this a little bit. Now, you don't have to get super crazy about balancing equations. That will be high school. But I'm just going to give you the proper balanced equation. So in every time photosynthesis happens, there are 6 water molecules required, 6 carbon dioxide molecules required. It makes 1 sugar, and there are 6 more oxygens let off. So I'm going to fully draw that out, and hopefully that will make a little bit more sense to you. And there we go. Feel free to pause if you need to copy this down. I also highly recommend doing different colors so that you know what's going on. If they're all just the same color circles, it's not really going to make any sense, okay? Now if we look at it, count up the number of blues on this side. There are 12 total. On the other side, there are also 12. So these blues rearrange themselves to become this. Count up all of the pinks, which are our oxygens. There are 18 of them. So we have 6 in here. 12 of them left over here for another 18. Go ahead and count up the greens. That's our carbons. There's 6 of them, and also 6 of them over here. So essentially what happened is we take energy, we take all of these particles, and we rearrange them to become sugar and a little bit of oxygen just left over. And this is the chemical process for photosynthesis. Now, we're going to do the exact same thing down here. You're going to notice, again, probably some similarities. So I'm going to go ahead and write out the equation. There we go. And I just moved energy to the end for some space efficiency. So it's the exact same equation, just in reverse. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing that I did up here and draw all of those out. And there we are. So all this really is doing is storing energy. That is really the point of this whole process. We need to be able to store energy to use it later, or else any energy that we would acquire, we'd have to use right away, which is not efficient, right? You basically have to be eating all the time if we couldn't store energy and then access it later, because then you wouldn't be able to write, you wouldn't be able to walk around, you wouldn't be able to do your chores, you wouldn't be able to play sports, because any energy that you would use if we didn't have a way of storing it, you'd have to use right away, which is just not efficient. Same thing with plants. They, use energy and they use it throughout the process that they grow, but something like in the winter, they need to be able to store that. So in order to really make life happen and not make it this really desperate, need to be acquiring energy all the time, we have this storage mechanism between photosynthesis and cellular respiration, and they really are this beautiful cycle between them. And if you're still not fully grasping it, we are going to be working with this for a little bit while longer, so don't worry about it. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon. Bye.